The Academy's cafeteria buzzed with its usual chaos of alien languages and clashing cultures. 17 different species from across the Galactic Coalition mingled at floating tables, their conversations a symphony of clicks, growls, and harmonic tones. At the far corner, almost invisible among the towering Krelian warriors and the four-armed Zenthari tacticians, sat Sarah Chen. She hunched over her nutrition tablet, auburn hair falling like a curtain around her pale face. Her small frame seemed to shrink further as a group of Vorthak cadets strutted past, their scaled hides gleaming under the artificial lights. One of them, Zektar, paused and looked down at her with predatory yellow eyes. "Still here, little human?" His voice rumbled through the translator implant, each word dripping with disdain. "I thought your species would have given up by now. This is the Galactic Defense Academy, not a daycare center." Sarah's fingers tightened around her tablet, but she didn't look up. The Vorthak were known throughout the galaxy as the ultimate warriors, their homeworld a crucible of endless conflict that had forged them into living weapons. They stood 8 feet tall with natural armor plating and reflexes that could track a plasma bolt in flight. Humans, by comparison, were considered barely sentient newcomers to the galactic stage. Earth joined the Coalition 3 years ago, Zektar continued, his clawed hand resting on the table beside her. And in all that time, not a single human has made it past basic training. You're kinder soft, weak, emotional. You have no place among real warriors. A few other cadets had gathered now, representing various species that had little love for humanity. The Hegemony War was still fresh in everyone's memory, where Earth had somehow managed to survive first contact with a hostile alien force through what the galaxy considered pure luck. Most species viewed humans as a charity case, a primitive world that the Coalition had taken pity on. "My cousin serves on the Hegemony border," added a crystalline Sithari cadet, her voice chiming like broken glass. "She says human ships flee at the first sign of trouble. Cowards, every one of them." Sarah's jaw clenched, but she remained silent. She had heard it all before, countless times since arriving at the Academy 6 months ago. Her test scores were exceptional, her tactical simulations ranked in the top 5% of her class. But none of that seemed to matter. In the eyes of her peers and instructors, she was just another weak human, playing at being a soldier. The Academy itself was a marvel of galactic engineering, a massive space station orbiting the neutral world of Kepler Prime. Its corridors stretched for miles, housing training facilities that could simulate any environment in known space. The gravity could be adjusted to match any homeworld. The atmosphere could be tailored to support any breathing apparatus, and the combat scenarios could recreate historical battles from across the galaxy. Yet for all its technological wonders, the Academy operated on the ancient principle of natural selection. Only the strongest, fastest, and most cunning would graduate to join the Coalition Defense Force. The washout rate was 70%, and for humans it was closer to 98%. Sarah had grown up on the stories of Earth's first contact, how Captain Mitchell and his crew had somehow held off an entire Hegemony battle group, long enough for Coalition forces to arrive. The official reports called it a tactical withdrawal, but the rumors spoke of something else entirely. Her father had been there, serving as a communications officer on the UES Defiance, but he never spoke of what really happened during those 3 days in the Tau Ceti system. "Maybe you should consider transfer to the agricultural program," Zektar suggested with mock kindness. "I hear humans are decent at growing plants. Leave the fighting to those who were born for it." The laughter that followed felt like knives. Sarah finally looked up, her green eyes meeting Zektar's predatory gaze for just a moment before looking away again. She gathered her tablet and nutrition pack, rising from her seat with careful, measured movements. "Running away again, little mouse?" Zektar called after her. "How very human of you." Sarah walked away without a word, her footsteps silent on the metallic floor. The corridor outside the cafeteria was mercifully empty, allowing her to breathe freely for the first time in an hour. She made her way toward the human quarters, a small section of the academy that housed the 37 human cadets currently enrolled. The human wing was noticeably different from the rest of the academy. The ceilings were lower, the gravity was set to Earth standard, and the air had the recycled taste of home. Pictures of Earth hung on the walls, showing blue oceans and green forests that seemed impossibly peaceful compared to the militaristic atmosphere of the academy. She passed the common room, where a few of her fellow human cadets were studying. They looked up as she entered, their faces showing a mixture of sympathy and resignation. They all knew the look she wore, had all experienced the same dismissive treatment from their alien classmates. "Rough day?" asked Marcus Webb, a stocky young man from the American Federation. His left arm bore the scars of a training accident from 2 weeks prior, a reminder of how dangerous the academy could be for those not built like living tanks. "Same as always," Sarah replied, settling into a chair by the observation window. Through the transparent aluminum, she could see the stars wheeling slowly as the academy rotated on its axis. Somewhere out there was Earth, a small blue dot that seemed increasingly distant with each passing day. "Tomorrow's the combat practical," said Elena Vasquez, looking up from her tactical manual. "I heard they're pairing us with the Vortex squad for the infiltration scenario." Sarah nodded absently, her mind already running through the mission parameters they had been given. A hostage rescue operation on a hostile world, with real consequences for failure. The instructors had made it clear that this exercise would determine who advanced to the next level of training and who would be sent home in disgrace. Outside her window, a Coalition patrol ship glided past, its hull scarred by recent combat with hegemony raiders. The war was escalating again, and the galaxy needed warriors more than ever. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to quiet the voice in her head that whispered she didn't belong here, that she should give up and go home before she embarrassed herself further. But somewhere deep inside, another voice whispered back, reminding her of her father's words the day she left for the academy. "They'll underestimate you, Sarah. They always underestimate us. That's when we show them what humans are really made of." The simulation chamber hummed to life as dawn broke over Kepler Prime's artificial horizon. Sarah stood at attention with her assigned squad, watching as the holographic environment materialized around them. The Academy's most advanced training facility could recreate any battlefield with perfect accuracy, down to the smell of alien vegetation and the feel of foreign soil beneath their boots. Today's scenario was Cathara Prime, a contested world on the hegemony border, where coalition forces had recently lost contact with a diplomatic team. The mission was simple in theory: infiltrate the captured embassy, extract the hostages, and escape without triggering a full-scale engagement. In practice, it was designed to push cadets to their absolute limits. Instructor Valix, a battle-scarred Krelian veteran with missing tentacles from the siege of Arcturus, addressed the assembled teams. His translator rendered his deep, gurgling speech into crisp coalition standard. "This exercise will test everything you have learned. The enemy forces are controlled by advanced AI, and they will not hesitate to kill. Your performance here determines whether you advance to tactical command training or return to your homeworlds." Sarah's squad consisted of herself, Zektar, and 2 other Vorthak warriors, a Zenthari specialist named Quelix, and surprisingly, Marcus Webb. The human pairing was unusual, most likely intended to ensure at least one human witness when their inevitable failure occurred. Zektar took command without consultation, his massive frame casting a shadow over the smaller team members. "The plan is simple," he growled, studying the tactical display. "We go in fast and hard, overwhelm their defenses with superior firepower. The Zenthari handles communications, the humans—" He paused, looking at Sarah and Marcus with obvious disdain. "They stay in the rear and try not to get in our way." Quelix's forearms manipulated the holographic terrain, highlighting defensive positions and patrol routes. The Zenthari were renowned throughout the galaxy for their tactical brilliance, their multi-threaded consciousness allowing them to process battlefield information at superhuman speeds. "The embassy is heavily fortified. Direct assault will result in hostage casualties. Then we move fast enough that they don't have time to kill them," Zektar replied dismissively. "Vorthak tactics have never failed." Sarah bit back her response, knowing that any suggestion from her would be ignored or mocked. Instead, she studied the mission parameters in silence, noting details that the others seemed to overlook. The enemy force composition, the terrain features, the timing of patrol rotations. Her father had taught her to see the battlefield as a living thing, constantly changing and full of opportunities for those patient enough to observe. The simulation began with their dropship touching down in a forest clearing 3 kilometers from the target. The artificial sun beat down mercilessly, and the humid air carried the scent of sulfurous vegetation native to Cathara Prime. Each team member carried standard coalition equipment, plasma rifles, personal shields, medical supplies, and enough rations for 72 hours. Zektar immediately set a punishing pace through the dense undergrowth, his natural armor allowing him to crash through branches that would have torn exposed skin. The other Vorthak followed in his wake, their massive forms leaving a trail that a blind tracker could follow. Sarah and Marcus struggled to keep up, their human physiology proving inadequate for the brutal forced march. "Slow them down, little humans," Zektar called back mockingly as Sarah stumbled over a root. "Perhaps you should have stayed home where it's safe." They reached the embassy perimeter as the alien sun reached its zenith. The building was a typical coalition structure, designed to withstand siege conditions with energy barriers and automated defenses. However, those same defenses had been turned against the coalition forces inside, trapping them in what had once been their sanctuary. Zektar surveyed the approach through his rifle scope, noting the patrol patterns and defensive emplacements. "Quelix jammed their communications. Gorvek and Malthan, you're with me for the frontal assault. We hit them fast before they know what's happening." Sarah watched the enemy positions with growing unease. Something felt wrong about the scenario, but she couldn't pinpoint exactly what. The patrols were too regular, the defenses too obvious. It felt like a trap waiting to be sprung. "Sir," she said quietly. The patrol patterns seemed designed to funnel attackers toward the main entrance. Maybe you should follow orders," Zektar snapped. "This is a warrior's mission, not a time for human cowardice." The assault began with Quelix's electronic warfare suite disrupting enemy communications across the complex. The Vorthak team advanced under covering fire, their plasma rifles cutting through defensive positions with brutal efficiency. For a moment it seemed like Zektar's confidence was justified. They reached the embassy's outer perimeter without significant resistance. Then the trap was sprung. Hidden defensive turrets emerged from concealed positions, catching the assault team in a crossfire of devastating energy beams. The simulation AI had predicted their approach vector perfectly, using the obvious patrol patterns to guide them into a killing field. Gorvek fell immediately, his shield overloaded by concentrated fire. Malthan lasted 3 seconds longer before a plasma bolt found the weak point in his armor. Zektar roared in rage and pain as enemy fire forced him to take cover behind a crumbling wall. His left arm hung useless at his side, the armor cracked and smoking. The frontal assault had failed completely, and now they were pinned down with wounded team members and no clear escape route. "Quelix, status report." Zektar barked into his communicator. "Communication jammers are active, but they have backup systems. Multiple hostiles converging on our position. Estimate 15 minutes before we are overrun." Sarah pressed herself against the same wall as Zektar, her heart pounding as energy bolts scorched the air above her head. Marcus was 20 meters away, dragging the wounded Gorvek to safety with strength that shouldn't have been possible for his slight frame. The simulation was brutally realistic, designed to test not just tactics but psychological endurance under fire. "This is impossible," Zektar snarled, his warrior pride warring with the reality of their situation. The intelligence was wrong. The defenses are too strong for a squad-level assault. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to think past the chaos. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, lessons learned during quiet evenings in their small apartment on Luna Station. "In war, Sarah, the strongest blow isn't always the right one. Sometimes the smallest action in the right place can topple an empire." She opened her eyes and studied the embassy structure through the tactical display on her wrist unit. The building's power grid, its defensive systems, the patrol routes that had seemed so obvious before. And then she saw it, the pattern within the pattern, the weakness that the AI had hidden behind layers of misdirection. "I have an idea," she said quietly. Zektar looked at her with a mixture of desperation and contempt. "Human ideas got us into this mess." "No," Sarah replied, her voice growing steadier. "Vorthak pride got us into this mess. My idea might get us out." The energy fire intensified around their position, and she could hear the distinctive whine of enemy reinforcements approaching through the forest. Time was running out, and their options were disappearing with each passing second. Sarah took a deep breath and activated her communicator, ready to either save her team or condemn them all to failure. "The power distribution network," Sarah said, pulling up a schematic on her wrist display. "The embassy's defensive grid draws from 3 primary nodes. They're designed to be redundant, But the AI made one mistake. Zektar glanced at her display while plasma fire continued to rain down around them. What mistake? Those nodes are inside the perimeter, heavily defended. Look at the timing, Sarah insisted, highlighting the patrol patterns. Every 17 minutes, there's a 60-second gap in coverage at the eastern node. The patrols think they're randomized, but they're following a pattern based on the embassy's original security protocols. Quellix's voice crackled through the communicator. Interesting observation, human. But even if you're correct, one person would need to cross 40 meters of open ground, disable a heavily shielded power node, and return without being detected. Impossible for any species. Not impossible, Sarah said quietly. Just improbable. She was already moving before Zektar could stop her, slipping away from their defensive position like a shadow. The Vorthak warrior's roar of protest was lost in the chaos of battle as she disappeared into the undergrowth surrounding the embassy complex. The jungle on Cathara Prime was dense and hostile, filled with thorny vines and patches of acid fog that could dissolve exposed skin in seconds. Sarah's small frame allowed her to navigate spaces that would have trapped larger species, while her human endurance let her maintain a steady pace despite the oppressive heat and humidity. She reached the eastern perimeter just as the patrol cycle entered its vulnerable phase. Through her scope, she could see the power node, a crystalline structure 30 meters away, surrounded by energy barriers and automated sensors. The gap in coverage Quellix had dismissed as insignificant suddenly looked like a highway. Sarah had spent her childhood playing in the asteroid fields around Luna Station, navigating three-dimensional puzzles that would have challenged a Zenthari tactical computer. Her father worked salvage, and he had taught her to see the spaces between dangers, the paths that existed in the moments when threats weren't looking. She moved like liquid mercury across the open ground, her body flowing from cover to cover in a pattern that seemed random, but followed the precise timing of the sensor sweeps. A roll behind a damaged vehicle, a sprint to a pile of rubble, a careful crawl under a fallen tree, each movement calculated to exploit the tiny gaps in an otherwise perfect detection grid. The power node was beautiful in its alien design, a spiral of living crystal that pulsed with contained energy. According to her scans, it was shielded against both energy weapons and explosive devices, designed to withstand a direct assault by a full combat team. But Sarah wasn't planning an assault. She pulled a maintenance tool from her kit, a simple device used for adjusting equipment connections. The kind of tool that would be ignored by military-grade sensors because it posed no obvious threat. Her fingers worked quickly, identifying the node's harmonic frequency through subtle vibrations in the crystal matrix. This was the part her instructors would never understand. The uniquely human trait that the galaxy consistently underestimated. Where other species saw complex technology requiring complex solutions, humans saw elegant systems that could be disrupted with the right touch in the right place. The crystal sang as she adjusted its resonance frequency, a sound so beautiful it made her heart ache. For just a moment, the node's energy output fluctuated, creating a cascade failure that propagated through the entire defensive network. Emergency systems kicked in immediately, but Sarah was already gone, melting back into the jungle as alarms began to wail throughout the complex. The embassy's defensive grid collapsed in sections, creating gaps that her teammates could exploit. Through her communicator, she could hear Zektar's shocked voice coordinating a new assault plan, his tactical thinking adapting quickly to the changed battlefield conditions. Impossible, Quellix was saying. The power grid failure appears to be a resonance cascade, but that would require precise harmonic manipulation. No species has that level of fine motor control. Sarah allowed herself a small smile as she made her way back toward the rendezvous point. No species except humans, apparently. They might lack the natural armor of the Vorthak, the tactical genius of the Zenthari, or the technological mastery of the Sithari, but humans had something else entirely. They could see the small solutions, the quiet approaches, the gentle touches that could topple mountains. While other species built bigger weapons and stronger armor, humans built better understanding. The embassy infiltration proceeded smoothly with the defensive grid compromised. Zektar and the remaining Vorthak warriors provided cover, while Quellix used her electronic warfare skills to map the building's interior. Marcus, proving more capable than anyone expected, led the actual hostage extraction with a combination of stealth and tactical awareness that impressed even their alien teammates. Sarah coordinated the operation from her position in the jungle, using her unique perspective to guide the team through gaps in the enemy's response. She had become the quiet center around which the mission revolved, though she suspected her teammates hadn't quite realized it yet. The hostages were located in the embassy's central conference room, guarded by a minimal force that clearly hadn't expected the defenses to fail. Quellix's sensors showed 12 diplomatic personnel from various coalition species, all alive but showing signs of rough treatment during their captivity. "Guard rotation in 30 seconds, Sarah whispered into her communicator, watching the patrol patterns through her scope. "East corridor will be clear for 90 seconds starting now." Marcus moved like a ghost through the embassy corridors, his human flexibility allowing him to navigate ventilation shafts and maintenance passages that other species couldn't access. He reached the conference room just as Sarah had predicted, finding only 2 guards who were quickly overwhelmed by concentrated stun fire. The extraction proceeded flawlessly, with the rescued diplomats moving through carefully planned routes while Sarah continued to monitor enemy response patterns. Her quiet voice guided them past patrols, around sensors, and through gaps in the rebuilding defensive network. They reached the extraction point just as their dropship arrived, its pilot having received the mission. Complete signal right on schedule. The simulation environment began to fade as Instructor Valix called for exercise termination, the artificial jungle dissolving back into the Academy's sterile training chamber. Zektar stood in the center of the chamber, his massive frame somehow diminished by confusion and reluctant respect. The other teams had failed their scenarios completely, suffering total casualties or mission failures that would have resulted in diplomatic disasters. Only Sarah's squad had achieved complete success. "How?" Zektar asked, his translator struggling with the emotional complexity of his voice. The defenses were impossible to breach with conventional tactics. Sarah removed her helmet and shook out her sweat-dampened hair, looking smaller and more fragile than ever in her oversized combat gear. "Maybe that's the problem," she said quietly. "Everyone thinks like a warrior. Sometimes you need to think like a human." Instructor Valix approached their group, his expression unreadable behind his alien features. In his clawed hands, he carried a data tablet showing their mission performance metrics, numbers that would determine their future at the Academy. The silence stretched uncomfortably as cadets from the failed teams gathered around, waiting to hear the assessment that would make or break careers before they had even begun. Instructor Valix's compound eyes studied the data tablet for what felt like an eternity. The training chamber remained silent except for the soft hum of cooling systems and the distant sound of other exercises continuing throughout the Academy. Sarah felt the weight of dozens of alien gazes upon her, most filled with skepticism and barely concealed contempt. Team 7 achieved mission parameters with 0 casualties and minimal resource expenditure, Valix announced finally, his gurgling voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Time to completion, 47 minutes. Hostage extraction, successful. Enemy alert level at extraction, minimal. A ripple of surprise ran through the assembled cadets. The other teams had either failed completely or achieved Pyrrhic victories with heavy casualties and blown cover. Team 7's performance was not just successful. It was exceptional by any standard. However, Valix continued, and Sarah's heart sank. The mission was completed through methods not covered in standard tactical doctrine. The power node sabotage was accomplished through unknown means, raising questions about the validity of the simulation parameters. Zektar stepped forward, his massive frame towering over the instructor. "Sir, the human's actions were unconventional but effective." She identified a weakness that our tactical analysis missed entirely. Sarah blinked in surprise. She had expected Zektar to dismiss her contribution or claim credit for the mission's success. Instead, the Vorthak warrior was defending her actions before the Academy's most feared instructor. "Is that your assessment, Cadet Zektar?" Valix asked, his tentacles writhing in what Sarah had learned was the Krelian equivalent of raised eyebrows. "Yes, sir." Cadet Chen demonstrated tactical thinking that saved the mission when conventional approaches failed. Her small size and unconventional methods allowed her to succeed where brute force would have resulted in catastrophic failure. Quellix spoke up as well, her crystalline voice chiming with harmonic undertones. The human's analysis of the patrol patterns was mathematically sophisticated. She identified a vulnerability in the enemy's response algorithm that my own tactical systems had classified as irrelevant. Marcus stepped forward too, still carrying the weight of the successful hostage extraction. Sir, humans think differently than other species. We see patterns and possibilities that others miss. Maybe that's not a weakness. Valix's attention focused on Sarah, his alien features unreadable. Cadet Chen, explain your actions during the power node infiltration. How did you disable a military-grade defensive system with basic maintenance tools? Sarah felt her mouth go dry. She had hoped no one would ask for technical details about her sabotage method. The truth was, she wasn't entirely sure herself how she had known exactly where and how to apply pressure to create the resonance cascade. It had felt instinctive, like solving a three-dimensional puzzle her mind could visualize but not fully explain. The crystal matrix was oscillating at its natural frequency, she said carefully. I could feel the harmonic vibrations through the maintenance tool. By adjusting the frequency slightly, I created interference patterns that destabilized the entire network. You could feel harmonic vibrations? Valix's translator struggled with the concept. This is not a documented capability of human sensory systems. Maybe it is, said a new voice from the chamber entrance. Maybe we just haven't been looking at human capabilities correctly. Admiral Thoros entered the training chamber, his presence immediately commanding attention from every cadet and instructor present. The legendary Altarian warrior bore scars from a dozen major battles, including the famous defense of the Rigel colonies where his tactical genius had saved 3 billion lives. His crystalline exoskeleton caught the chamber's lights, casting rainbow patterns across the walls. Admiral, Valix said, snapping to attention along with every other being in the chamber. We were conducting standard tactical assessment of... I've been watching the simulation feeds. Thoros interrupted, his harmonic voice carrying authority that transcended species barriers. All of them. 7 teams attempted the Kythera Prime scenario today. 6 failed catastrophically. 1 succeeded brilliantly. The Admiral's attention turned to Sarah, and she felt as though she were being examined by some vast intelligence that could see straight through her. Cadet Chen, your academy records show consistently high performance in tactical simulations, but your instructors have noted concerns about your physical capabilities and psychological resilience. Sarah's heart sank. Here it came, the polite dismissal that would send her back to Earth with her dreams shattered. Yes, sir. However, Thoros continued, your performance today demonstrates something far more valuable than physical prowess or conventional tactical thinking. You demonstrated the ability to see solutions that no one else could perceive. That is a rare gift regardless of species. The chamber fell silent. Admiral Thoros was known throughout the galaxy as a brilliant tactician, but also as someone who never offered praise lightly. His words carried weight that could shape careers and determine the course of wars. Sir, Zektar interjected hesitantly, are you saying that human thinking methods have tactical value? Thoros turned his attention to the massive Vorthak warrior. I'm saying that diversity of thought is the Coalition's greatest strategic advantage. We face enemies who understand how Vorthak warriors fight, how Zenthari tacticians plan, how Krelian engineers build, but they don't understand how humans think, because until now we haven't understood it ourselves. He activated a holographic display that showed the Academy's tactical database. Hundreds of historical scenarios appeared, representing the greatest military challenges the galaxy had faced over the past century. Every one of these scenarios has been attempted by thousands of cadets over the years. Success rates vary by species, but certain patterns emerge. The display shifted to show statistical breakdowns. Vorthak cadets excelled at direct assault scenarios. Zenthari dominated complex multi-unit operations. Sithri performed best in technological warfare simulations. Each species had clear strengths and predictable methods. But here, Thoros highlighted a subset of scenarios. We see something interesting. Unconventional solutions that appeared only when human cadets were present. Not common, but consistent enough to suggest a pattern. Sarah stared at the data, seeing human names scattered through the most creative tactical solutions in the Academy's database. They were outliers, statistical anomalies that had been dismissed as flukes or simulation errors. But when viewed together, they painted a picture of human thinking that no one had recognized before. The Tau Ceti incident, Thoros said quietly, and Sarah's breath caught. 3 years ago, a human fleet held off a superior hegemony force through tactics that our best analysts still don't fully understand. The official reports called it luck, but I've studied the battle recordings. It wasn't luck. It was something else entirely. The Admiral's gaze returned to Sarah. Your father was there, wasn't he? Communications Officer Chen aboard the UES Defiance? Yes, sir, Sarah whispered. Then you know that the galaxy owes humanity a debt. Not for physical strength or technological superiority, but for showing us that there are always more ways to solve a problem than we imagine. Thoros closed the holographic display and addressed the entire chamber. Starting tomorrow, all tactical scenarios will include unconventional solution protocols. We will study human thinking methods the same way we study Vorthak combat techniques or Zenthari strategic planning. He paused at the chamber exit and looked back at Sarah one final time. Cadet Chen, report to Advanced Tactical Command at 800 tomorrow. It's time we learned what humans can really do when given the chance. As the Admiral disappeared through the exit, the chamber erupted in excited conversation. Alien voices mixed with human ones as cadets began to process what had just happened. Sarah stood in the center of it all, still hardly believing that her quiet moment of intuition had somehow changed everything. Zektar approached her, his massive frame no longer seeming quite so intimidating. I owe you an apology, he said formally. And my thanks. You saved the mission when my tactics failed. We all contributed, Sarah replied, still overwhelmed by the day's events. That's what teams do. But even as she said it, she could feel something shifting in the Academy's atmosphere. Word of the simulation results was already spreading through the corridors, carried by the excited chatter of cadets who had witnessed something unprecedented. For the first time since arriving at the Academy, Sarah felt like she truly belonged. The Advanced Tactical Command Center buzzed with activity as Sarah entered at precisely 0800 hours. The chamber was vastly different from the standard training facilities, filled with holographic displays showing real-time intelligence from across the galaxy. Star maps flickered with the movements of coalition fleets, while tactical computers processed streams of data from the ongoing border conflicts with the hegemony. Admiral Thoros stood at the center of it all, his crystalline form refracting the light from dozens of displays into dancing patterns across the walls. Around him, senior cadets from various species worked at advanced tactical stations, their movements precise and coordinated like parts of a vast machine. Cadet Chen, report to Station 7, the Admiral commanded without looking up from a strategic display showing the Outer Rim territories. You'll be working with our crisis response team today. Station 7 was occupied by a mixed group of senior cadets, all of whom looked up with varying degrees of curiosity and skepticism as Sarah approached. She recognized Cathara, a brilliant Zenthari strategist whose multi-threaded consciousness could process tactical data faster than most computers. Beside her stood Vraktor, a Vorthak warrior whose family had served in the Coalition Defense Force for 6 generations. So you're the human who broke the Cathara simulation, Cathara said, her forearms continuing to manipulate holographic data streams even as she spoke. Impressive, though I'm curious to see if it was skill or fortune. Before Sarah could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the command center. The holographic displays shifted to show an emergency situation developing in real time. Red warning indicators cascaded across the star maps as automated systems began processing incoming distress signals. Crisis alert, Admiral Thoros announced, his voice cutting through the noise. Hegemony forces have launched a surprise attack on Research Station Omega in the Vega system. The station houses critical xenobiology research and approximately 800 civilian scientists from 12 different species. The main display zoomed in on the Vega system, showing the research station as a small dot, surrounded by the expanding signatures of enemy vessels. Intelligence reports streamed across secondary displays, painting a grim picture of the unfolding situation. Station defenses are minimal, reported a Cytheri analyst, her crystalline voice chiming with urgency. Estimated time before complete hegemony control, 6 hours. Nearest coalition fleet response, 14 hours minimum. Sarah felt her stomach drop as she processed the implications. 800 civilians trapped in space with nowhere to run, facing an enemy known for taking no prisoners. The mathematics were simple and horrifying. Options? Admiral Thoros demanded. Vraktor stepped forward, his massive frame radiating barely contained aggression. Sir, we could order the station to implement scorched earth protocols. Destroy the research data before it falls into enemy hands. That condemns 800 people to death, Cathara objected, her multiple arms working frantically to analyze defensive possibilities. Perhaps if we redirect the patrol fleets from the Centauri sector, which would take 11 hours and leave the Centauri colonies defenseless, Thoros replied grimly. The hegemony has planned this well. They know our response capabilities. Sarah studied the tactical display, her mind automatically processing the distances, fleet positions, and time factors involved. It was exactly the kind of no-win scenario the Academy used to teach cadets about the harsh realities of military command. Sometimes there were no good options, only terrible ones and worse ones. But as she examined the data, something nagged at her consciousness. A detail that seemed insignificant but somehow important. She pulled up the detailed specifications for Research Station Omega, scrolling through technical data that most tactical officers would consider irrelevant. "Admiral," she said quietly, "what kind of research was the station conducting?" Thoros glanced at her with barely concealed impatience. "Xenobiology, as I stated. Various projects studying non-coalition life forms." "But specifically, what kind of life forms?" Sarah insisted, her fingers dancing across the interface to access deeper files. The research manifest shows several projects involving adaptive camouflage organisms from the Magellan Clouds. "Irrelevant," Fraktor growled. "We need military solutions, not scientific curiosities." But Sarah was already diving deeper into the station's research database, her human intuition picking up patterns that the tactical computers had dismissed as unimportant. "Project Mirage," she read aloud. "Studying adaptive camouflage in deep space organisms. Current specimens include shadowfish from the Void Nebula, capable of bending light around their bodies." Admiral Thoros turned his full attention to her. "Explain your thinking, cadet." "The research station has active specimens of creatures that can manipulate electromagnetic radiation," Sarah said, her excitement growing as the pieces fell into place. "If the research team could adapt that ability on a larger scale." Cathara's eyes widened as her tactical mind grasped the implications. "Optical camouflage for the entire station. The hegemony forces are using visual targeting systems for precision strikes. If they can't see the station, the power requirements would be enormous," Fraktor objected. "Research stations don't have military-grade generators." Sarah was already pulling up the station's technical specifications. "But they have experimental reactors for the research projects. And if we could synchronize the camouflage field with the station's orbital mechanics..." Her fingers flew across the interface, sketching out a solution that seemed impossible on first examination. The plan required precise timing, massive power redistribution, and coordination between the research team and the station's automated systems. It was exactly the kind of complex, unconventional approach that human thinking seemed to excel at. "The station would effectively disappear from hegemony sensors for approximately 47 minutes, she explained, highlighting the orbital calculations on the main display. "Long enough for them to change trajectory and hide in the asteroid field at the system's edge." Admiral Thoros studied the proposal with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. "The power calculations are theoretical. The coordination requirements are extraordinary. The margin for error is essentially zero." "Yes, sir," Sarah admitted, "but it's the only option that doesn't involve writing off 800 lives." The command center fell silent as senior officers processed the audacious plan. On paper, it violated every principle of conventional tactical thinking. It relied on untested technology, required perfect execution under combat conditions, and depended on research scientists performing tasks far outside their expertise. "Cathara, analysis," Thoros commanded. The Zenthari strategist's forearms moved in complex patterns as her enhanced consciousness ran probability calculations. Chance of success 18%. Chance of catastrophic failure 31%. Chance of partial success resulting in reduced casualties 51%. Fraktor. The Vorthak warrior's expression was grim. "It's not a military solution, sir. It's a gamble based on civilian technology and untested theories." "Which is exactly why it might work," Thoros said quietly. "The hegemony expects us to think like military officers. They've planned their attack around our conventional responses." He activated the long-range communication array, establishing contact with Research Station Omega. The display flickered with interference from the ongoing battle, but the connection held long enough to reach Dr. Martinez, the station's lead xenobiologist. "Doctor, this is Admiral Thoros. I'm transmitting a theoretical application of your shadowfish research. Can your team implement this protocol within 30 minutes? The response came back crackling with static and the distant sounds of emergency alarms. Admiral, this is completely outside our field of expertise. We're biologists, not engineers. Doctor, Sarah interrupted, leaning toward the communication array. You don't need to be engineers. You just need to think like scientists. The shadowfish adapt their camouflage to environmental conditions automatically. You're not building a machine. You're creating an environment that encourages the organisms to expand their natural abilities. There was a long pause before Dr. Martinez responded. That's actually a fascinating approach. If we could create sympathetic resonance fields throughout the station's structure. Yes, I think we can attempt this. Admiral Thoros closed the communication link and turned to Sarah. Cadet Chen, you will coordinate with the research team and monitor the implementation. If this works, you may have just saved 800 lives. If it fails, we're no worse off than we were before, Sarah finished. Sometimes that's the best you can hope for. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of frantic communication and precise coordination. Sarah found herself guiding a team of brilliant scientists through applications of their own research that they had never imagined. The shadowfish responded to the environmental changes exactly as she had predicted, their natural camouflage abilities expanding to encompass the entire research station. When the optical camouflage field finally activated, Research Station Omega simply vanished from both visual and electronic detection systems. On the tactical display, the hegemony forces appeared to search frantically for their disappeared target, their attack formations dissolving into confusion as their primary objective seemed to evaporate into space. The silence in the command center was absolute, as everyone watched the hegemony fleet circle uselessly through empty space, their weapons targeting systems unable to lock onto something that no longer existed in any detectable spectrum. The rescue operation proceeded flawlessly for the next 6 hours. Research Station Omega remained invisible to hegemony sensors as it drifted through the asteroid field, powered down to minimal systems to avoid detection. The attacking fleet eventually withdrew in frustration, unable to locate their vanished target, and unwilling to waste resources searching an entire solar system. When Coalition reinforcements finally arrived, they found the research station safely hidden among the asteroids, its crew shaken but alive. The shadowfish had performed beyond all expectations, maintaining their expanded camouflage field through the entire ordeal before finally returning to their normal state as environmental conditions stabilized. News of the successful rescue spread through the academy within hours, carried by the excited chatter of cadets and instructors who could hardly believe what had transpired. A human cadet had conceived and coordinated a rescue operation that saved 800 lives using nothing but theoretical xenobiology and unconventional thinking. Sarah found herself the center of attention wherever she went. But the feeling was different now. Instead of dismissive stares and mocking comments, she received nods of respect and genuine curiosity about human tactical methods. Even the Vorthak cadets who had previously ignored her now acknowledged her presence with something approaching admiration. But the real change came 3 days later, when Admiral Thoros summoned her to his private office in the Academy's command tower. The chamber was Spartan by alien standards, decorated only with holographic displays showing the current tactical situation across Coalition space and a single physical artifact, a piece of crystal from the Battle of Rigel, where the Admiral had earned his legendary reputation. Sit, Thoros commanded, gesturing to a chair that had been adjusted for human proportions. We need to discuss your future at the Academy. Sarah's heart sank. She had been expecting this conversation, but somehow she had hoped that her recent success might have bought her more time. Sir, if this is about my physical training scores, this is about something far more important than physical training, Thoros interrupted. Tell me, what do you know about the Tau Ceti incident? The question caught Sarah off guard. Only what's in the official records, sir. My father was there, but he never spoke about the details. Admiral Thoros activated a holographic display that showed the Tau Ceti system as it had appeared 3 years ago. Coalition and Hegemony fleet positions appeared as colored dots, with movement vectors showing the flow of battle over several days. The official records state that Captain Mitchell's fleet conducted a fighting withdrawal that delayed Hegemony forces long, enough for Coalition reinforcements to arrive, Thoros said. What they don't mention is that the Hegemony force was superior in every measurable way. Better ships, better weapons, better trained crews. The display zoomed in to show the specific engagement zones where human ships had somehow held their ground against overwhelming odds. The battle recordings show tactical decisions that our best analysts still can't explain. Maneuvers that shouldn't have worked. Timing that defied conventional wisdom. Coordination that seemed almost telepathic. Sarah studied the battle data, seeing patterns that felt familiar despite being completely outside her experience. The human fleet movements had a quality she recognized from her own thinking during the research station crisis. Unconventional, intuitive, and somehow perfectly adapted to circumstances that no tactical manual could have prepared them for. The hegemony learned something important from that battle, Thoros continued. They learned that human tactics are unpredictable enough to be genuinely dangerous. That's why they've been targeting human colonies with increasing frequency. They're trying to eliminate a strategic threat before it fully develops. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. The attacks on human settlements weren't random acts of aggression. They were systematic attempts to prevent humanity from developing its tactical potential. The galaxy's newest members were already being targeted for extinction by enemies who understood their value better than their allies did. Sir, are you saying that the coalition leadership doesn't understand human capabilities? I'm saying that until very recently, neither did we, Thoros admitted. Your species thinks differently than any other known intelligence. Where we see complex problems requiring complex solutions, you see elegant simplicities that we miss entirely. It's not just useful, it's revolutionary. He activated another display, this one showing Academy training records spanning the past century. Every major tactical innovation in coalition military doctrine has come from diversity of thought. Vorthak assault techniques, Centauri strategic planning, Krelian engineering solutions. Each species contributed something unique that made us collectively stronger. The display highlighted a section showing human cadet performance over the past 3 years. But human thinking appears to be qualitatively different. You don't just add to our existing capabilities. You reveal entirely new ways of approaching problems. Sarah felt the weight of unexpected responsibility settling on her shoulders. What are you asking me to do, sir? I'm offering you a choice, Thoros replied. You can continue with standard academy training, graduate in 2 years, and serve as a junior officer aboard a coalition vessel. You'll have a respectable career and make valuable contributions to our defense forces. He paused, his alien features somehow conveying the significance of what came next. Or you can join a classified project that I'm establishing. A new tactical development program designed to study and implement human strategic thinking on a systematic basis. The offer hung in the air between them like a live explosive. Sarah realized that she was being offered the chance to help reshape how the galaxy approached military strategy, but also the burden of representing her entire species in a conflict that was growing deadlier by the day. The program would be dangerous, Thoros warned. You'd be working with actual combat scenarios, not simulations. The hegemony has shown particular interest in capturing human tactical officers alive. If you're discovered, the torture would be extensive. Sarah thought of her father, serving aboard the UES Defiance during those desperate days at Tau Ceti. He had never spoken of what happened, but she had seen the nightmares that still woke him in the middle of the night, 3 years later. The weight of carrying human hopes and fears in the face of galactic conflict. How many others would be in this program? She asked. Initially just you, Thoros replied. If the concept proves viable, we'll expand to include other human cadets who show similar aptitude. But you would be the prototype, the proof of concept for an entirely new approach to military thinking. Sarah stood and walked to the chamber's observation window, looking out at the stars wheeling slowly past as the Academy rotated on its axis. Somewhere among those distant points of light were human colonies under threat, coalition fleets struggling against superior hegemony forces, and alien minds trying to understand how humanity might change the balance of power in a war that had raged for decades. She thought of the research station scientists she had helped save, 800 lives preserved through nothing more than unconventional thinking, and the willingness to see possibilities that others had missed. If human tactical methods could save 800 people, what might they accomplish on a larger scale? Admiral, she said finally, when do we start? Thoros allowed himself what might have been a smile, though the expression was difficult to read on his crystalline features. Immediately. But first, there's something you need to see. He activated a secure communication channel that connected directly to Coalition Intelligence headquarters. The display showed a classified video file that made Sarah's blood run cold. Hegemony forces conducting systematic raids on human settlements. Their attacks coordinated with a precision that suggested detailed intelligence about human defensive capabilities. This was recorded 6 hours ago at the New Geneva colony. Thoros said grimly. The hegemony isn't just targeting humans randomly anymore. They're studying our tactical responses, learning our weaknesses, preparing for something much larger. The video showed hegemony's shock troops overwhelming colonial defenses, with tactics specifically designed to counter human unpredictability. They had learned from Tau Ceti and adapted their own strategies accordingly. The war is escalating, Thoros continued. Within 6 months, we estimate that the hegemony will launch a major offensive designed to break coalition resistance permanently. If they succeed, every human world will become a target for systematic extermination. Sarah watched the destruction of New Geneva with growing horror and determination. The galaxy had underestimated humanity once, treating them as weak newcomers who needed protection, rather than allies who could contribute to their own defense. But the enemy had made the opposite mistake, recognizing. 6 months later, the classified video that would change everything was recorded during the Battle of Kepler's Edge, where a massive hegemony offensive met coalition forces in what military analysts expected to be the decisive engagement of the war. The recording began as routine combat documentation, but became something else entirely when Sarah Chen's tactical innovations turned the tide of galactic conflict. The battle started badly for coalition forces. 3 hegemony battle groups had emerged from hyperspace simultaneously, catching the defending fleet in a perfectly executed pincer movement. Admiral Thoros's flagship, the CSS Harmony, found itself at the center of a killing field with enemy dreadnoughts closing from multiple vectors. All ships, implement defensive pattern Omega, Thoros commanded from the bridge, his crystalline form refracting the red emergency lighting into ominous patterns. Around him, tactical officers from a dozen species worked frantically to coordinate a response to the overwhelming assault. But Sarah Chen stood at an auxiliary tactical station that hadn't existed 6 months earlier, her human fingers dancing across interfaces designed specifically for unconventional strategic analysis. The past months had transformed her from a timid cadet into something the galaxy had never seen before, a human tactical specialist whose thinking patterns had been systematically studied and refined. Admiral, defensive pattern Omega won't work, she said quietly, her voice cutting through the chaos of the bridge. The hegemony has studied our conventional responses. They're ready for everything in our tactical database. On the main display, hegemony forces pressed their attack with clockwork precision. Their battle formations were flawless, their timing perfect, their coordination absolute. Every coalition defensive maneuver was met with an immediate counter, as if the enemy could predict their responses before they were implemented. Then what do you suggest, Commander Chen? Thoros asked, using the field. Promotion he had granted her 3 months earlier, when her tactical innovations had saved the Rigel Defense Fleet. Sarah closed her eyes and let her mind process the 3-dimensional chess game unfolding around them. This was what she had trained for during those intensive months in the tactical development program. The ability to see patterns that no other species could perceive, to find solutions in the spaces between conventional thinking. We don't fight their battle, she said, opening her eyes with sudden clarity. We change the rules entirely. Her fingers flew across the tactical interface, pulling up data streams that most military officers would consider irrelevant. Asteroid trajectories, solar wind patterns, gravitational anomalies in the Kepler system. To trained tacticians, these were background conditions to be compensated for. To Sarah's human mind, they were opportunities waiting to be exploited. All ships, new formation, she announced, her voice carrying across the fleet communication network. Implement pattern Chen 7 Alpha. A ripple of confusion ran through the coalition fleet. Pattern Chen 7 Alpha wasn't in any tactical database because Sarah had invented it 30 seconds earlier, drawing on principles that no military academy had ever taught. Instead of meeting the hegemony assault head-on, coalition ships began moving in seemingly random patterns that appeared to be a complete breakdown of military discipline. Commander, what are you doing? Demanded Captain Vextar from the heavy cruiser Retribution. Your ships are breaking formation. Trust her, Admiral Thoros commanded, his faith in human thinking overriding every instinct his species possessed. All ships follow Commander Chen's instructions precisely. The hegemony forces pressed their advantage, interpreting the coalition's erratic movements as panic or system failures. Their dreadnoughts closed for the killing blow, confident that victory was within their grasp. Their tactical computers calculated firing solutions for targets that seemed to be moving without any coordinated purpose. But Sarah wasn't seeing individual ships at all. She was seeing the entire battlefield as a single vast organism that could be shaped by understanding forces that operated beyond conventional military thinking. The random movements she had ordered were precisely calculated to exploit gravitational currents and solar wind patterns that would amplify the effects of what came next. All ships, implement gravity well manipulation, she ordered. Mark targeting coordinates alpha through theta. The coalition fleet's most advanced ships carried experimental gravity manipulators, devices that had been considered too unstable for combat use. Academic physicists had theoretical models for using them in combination with natural gravitational fields, but no one had ever attempted it under battle conditions. Commander, those devices are untested, warned the chief engineering officer. If the calculations are wrong, we could create a cascade failure that destroys both fleets. The calculations are right, Sarah replied with quiet confidence. Trust the physics. What happened next defied every expectation of conventional space combat. As coalition ships activated their gravity manipulators in precise coordination with Sarah's calculations, the gravitational environment of the Kepler system began to shift in ways that seemed to violate the laws of physics. The hegemony dreadnoughts, massive and powerful but dependent on predictable gravitational conditions for their targeting systems, suddenly found themselves fighting not just coalition ships but the fundamental forces of space itself. Their perfectly coordinated formations began to drift apart as local gravity wells redirected their momentum in directions their navigators hadn't anticipated. Impossible. Came the transmission from the hegemony flagship, their communication systems apparently malfunctioning under the stress of the gravitational anomalies. Gravitational fields don't behave like this, but they did, when a human mind understood how to make them dance. Sarah had spent months studying the intersection between physics and tactical application, learning to see space itself as a weapon that could be wielded by those who understood its hidden patterns. The coalition counterattack came from vectors that shouldn't have existed. Ships appeared from gravitational shadows, their weapons striking at angles that the hegemony's defensive systems couldn't process. The perfectly coordinated enemy assault dissolved into chaos as their tactical computers tried to compensate for environmental conditions that changed faster than their programming could adapt. All hegemony forces, retreat to hyperspace jump points, came the panicked transmission from their command structure. Repeat, all forces withdraw immediately. But even their retreat was compromised by the gravitational manipulation. Hyperspace jump calculations required precise positioning and stable gravitational conditions. The constantly shifting fields made accurate jumps impossible, trapping the hegemony fleet in normal space where coalition forces could pursue them. The battle that was supposed to decide the war ended in complete coalition victory within 4 hours. 3 hegemony battle groups were either destroyed or captured, their survivors rescued from disabled ships by coalition medical teams who followed the ancient traditions of treating enemy wounded with the same care as their own, but the real victory was recorded by the automatic documentation systems aboard every ship in both fleets. The video showed something that would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations. A human tactical officer reshaping the fundamental nature of space combat through approaches that no other species had ever conceived. When the recording was eventually declassified and released to the Academy's training database, it spread through the Galactic communication network within hours. The timid human girl who had been dismissed as weak and irrelevant was revealed to be a strategic genius whose innovations had turned the tide of an interstellar war. On military bases throughout coalition space, alien officers watched the battle recordings with amazement and dawning understanding. The humans weren't just another species to be protected or patronized. They were partners whose unique capabilities could help the galaxy face challenges that conventional thinking couldn't solve. In the aftermath of Kepler's Edge, military doctrine throughout the coalition began to change. Human tactical officers were assigned to every major fleet command, Academy curricula were revised to include courses on unconventional strategic thinking. The war with the hegemony continued, but its character was fundamentally altered by the recognition that diversity of thought was the coalition's most powerful weapon. Sarah Chen herself was promoted to admiral at the unprecedented age of 21, becoming the youngest flag officer in coalition history. But more importantly, she became the symbol of humanity's true contribution to galactic civilization. Not physical strength or technological superiority, but the ability to see possibilities that others had never imagined. The leaked battle video ended with a single image that captured the moment when everything changed. Sarah standing on the bridge of the CSS Harmony, surrounded by alien officers who were no longer looking at her with dismissal or contempt, but with the respect accorded to someone who had proven that being different wasn't a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be celebrated. In the years that followed, when young human cadets arrived at the academy feeling small and out of place among their alien classmates, they would watch that video and understand that their humanity wasn't